Okay, welcome to another iPad painting tutorial. On today's tutorial I'm going to show you quite a simple mountain scene with some foreground trees and some really nice cloud textures for you to practice with. As usual, I'm using the app Procreate on the iPad, but you can probably take most of the techniques and the structure of this tutorial and apply it to a different app on a different tablet. But within this app I've opened one of the default A4 canvas size, and in terms of the brushes I'm going to be using airbrushing, soft brush, medium brush, and then I'm going to go to the artistic brush and use the leatherwood brush. I've already pre-selected some colours, which if I show you here in this section. Now each of these colours has a code called a hexadecimal code, and if you go to this section here where it says value, you can type them in one at a time, and all of these codes are down in the video description. And there's also a link that takes you to my Patreon page and you can download a colour file for free instead. Now you'll also find links for my Instagram, my TikTok and a Facebook group, and you can tag me on Instagram or share the work on Facebook and get feedback from myself and any other members of my Facebook group, for example. Okay, with all that said and done, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flood fill the background canvas with the first colour that I have here. So press and select the colour, drag it from the little circle at the top into the canvas, let go, and it flood fills it. We're going to go to our layers. On our layer 1, we'll click the plus symbol, it creates a layer above it. Go back to our colours, select the second colour, go to our brushes, airbrushing, soft brush. Now it's the soft brush at the top, it isn't the low or lower one down here. As you can see, there are difference in thicknesses, so you want to go for the one at the top that is a thicker brush. And I'm going to put my brush size up to 15% and 100% opacity, and I go just slightly above the halfway point and above just a little bit more. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur. I'm going to blur it in to about 60%. I'm going to create another layer, go back to my colours, and this time I'm going to go for the third colour in, which is a brighter orange this time. I'm going to turn the size of the brush down to about 10%, and just at the bottom of that area, so just a tiny bit below the halfway point this time, but almost right on the middle. Then we're going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and blur it in, this time to about 40%, like that. Go back to our layers and create another layer. Back to our colours, go to the fourth colour this time. This is the colour we're going to use for the dark clouds. Go to our brushes, stay on the soft brush, reduce it down to 3% size and about 50% opacity. And just at the top, we're going to start introducing in a round kind of formation and gesture. We're going to create a broken top surface. And I'm going to move this all the way across. It's going to be quite rough to begin with, so you don't need to worry too much. But we do need to vary it up, so create a little bit of undulation, so up and down. Allow it to be a little bit fragmented and broken along that top edge, quite irregular. Something like this. Then maybe turn the size of the brush up to more like 5%, and then we can just start to fill in a little bit below that point, just to thicken it up somewhat. Then I'm going to reduce the size of the brush down to 2%, maybe just a little bit lower on the opacity, down to 40%, and I'm just going to use this brush now to create some slightly more fragmented pieces that are just breaking away from the main structure, and also just slightly refine that edge as well. So I can create some little sticking out round shapes, just add slightly more interest and features along that top edge. And then perhaps also we can create some breakaway pieces here a little bit higher up. So you can create lots of small little dots or dashes, and then maybe they can collect together to create a larger form. Maybe it can start to splinter off from this section over here. And we can again turn the opacity down, put it down to about 20%, and we can just create some slightly more wispy areas just to create a suggestion that it's just merging in and out. and some more over here as well. Now I say this every time, and we repeatedly do landscape, so we have to deal with cloud textures often, and it isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do, so it just does take practice. There's no other way around it really, so don't expect it to become straight away. I still do skies that go wrong that I'm not entirely happy with. Sometimes it just seems to fall together and I'm really happy with it, and other times it doesn't seem to naturally look great and I have to work it and keep working it to try and make it look better. And sometimes it just falls together and looks great first time, or more easily anyway. So stick at it. If you need to do a few of these tutorials to really get more practice in, then that's the kind of thing that will help you get better. But don't skip too quickly past these kind of stages. They may be a little bit challenging at times, but that's probably where you need to do the most learning. So stick at it, try and make the most out of it. We're going to move along to the fifth colour now, and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to have the brush at about 4% and about 40% opacity. And I'm just going to start introducing some of this colour in now. So it's kind of blurring with the blue that we've already used. But we're bringing it down a little bit as well. Create some breaks and some, again, fragmenting of this type of texture down here. So allow gaps, it's all part of the interest, and then we can reduce it down to more like the 2% again, and just really focus on creating some of those breakaway forms and smaller textures. You could even reduce the size of the brush to the lowest part of 2% just before it becomes 1%. And it's really quite narrow if you want to get some really fine little details there in the clouds. Again, just concentrate on that edge. Sometimes that's where the interesting sections are. And you can alternate your brush, so you can turn it back up if you want to focus in on some of those bigger forms again. And then I'm going to turn it down to about 20%, and I'm just going to start introducing some slightly more subtle versions of that same thing as it comes a little bit further down still. We're not going to do too much of this bit, just small suggestions of that. We're going to go back to our layers, and we're going to go to the sixth colour in now, create a new layer, and again we'll have that about 3% size should work, and about 30% opacity. And I'm just going to warm up some of these just bottom section clouds here now, just a touch more. And we can reduce it down to the 2% size if we really want to bring in that precision again. Okay, we'll come back to that kind of colour, but I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to put it this time underneath layer 5. So layer 5 has that colour, but we're going underneath that. So it is layer 7, but we're putting it underneath layer 5 by just dragging it where it created at the top and just putting it in between layer 4 and 5. Then we're going to go to our colours, and we're going to go from the fourth in from the right. We're going to stay on the soft brush. We're going to put the size up to about 3% and keep it at 30% opacity. And I'm just now going to start bringing in this colour between the gaps, and you'll see that it starts to reveal itself through those spaces that we've left, which is really convenient. Now if we end up in a position where there's a really big gap, then we can reduce it down to about 2% size and just go around the little shapes that we've just created. So we want them to be outlined almost in a highlight of this orange, and we can be a little bit more precise in what we're doing. Just go around those darker shapes, around those edges, top and bottom. And we can also create some breakaway orange bits that just exist on their own as well. It doesn't need to be purely around the very edge of those grey sections. They can have little fragmented bits of the orange too. And again, just bring it in slightly around the edge of this one. And then we're going to just do the same over here. It's a layer underneath, so it's not going to interfere. It's not going to go over the nice colours that we've created. We're just using it to go from the underneath of it and just bring out some of those edges of those shapes and those forms and give it a highlight. And it can be really effective and just bringing that quality of cloud out. And again, any little breakaway areas, you're really going to see a lot more of those highlights around them as well. I'm keeping it on the 2% size. I think it helps just to be a little bit more precise and controlled with it. Otherwise, if you just turn it up and just do that, then it does it quickly, but I feel that the quality is somehow a little bit different. So take the time with the reduced brush and just be a little bit more precision based. And then we can just start to bring in this colour in the form of breakaway shapes too. And again, cutting across. Maybe we could turn it down even further to about 15%. That way it's going to be just bringing in a subtlety. There's a lot of magic can really happen in this type of cloud, I think, with subtleties. Okay, I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to go to, I'll go for the next colour, so the third in this time. It's still behind layer 5, and I'm just going to concentrate this colour. In fact, we'll turn the opacity up again, so about 30%, and I'm just going to allow some more concentration of lighter colour in this area. So it's slightly dimmer over here as we get away from the sun, but the sun is going to be over here. I might need to erase a little bit of the clouds just to accommodate the sun, but we're definitely going to have more of this yellow. So let's turn it up initially to about 5% size, and we can just increase the amount of yellow in this specific bit, then back down to 2% again, and again, perhaps even on the smallest part of 2%, so it's really quite precision. And we can just bring some of this yellow down a little bit further actually. So it's just picking up on the top edge. Some of these, what would be quite subtle features over here, are becoming more prominent nearer the sun because the light is really reflecting off it. And staying on the same layer, I'm going to go for the second in colour too, and I'm just going to bring out even more of that intense yellow light colour. And again, around these cloud shapes. So while I'm thinking of it, I will create another layer. So quite layer heavy this picture, but that's fine. And we'll stay on this yellow colour, and we'll stay on the soft brush, and we'll put it up to about 5% size and about 50% opacity. And we're just going to decide where to put the sun. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to tap it a few times just to really bring in enough yellow. Then I'm going to select this white colour here because it's going to really glow in the center. Turn the brush size down to the lower end of 4% and just press a few times in the center of that. Maybe it needs to be a little bit bigger, the top end of 4% perhaps. Aim for the center, just wiggle it in a little bit. So the very edge of it is yellow and the very center of it is white. Then we're going to go to the adjustments, the bloom setting, and you can see by ramping it up, you're really creating a super bright, effective glow. Now I'm going to go to that layer and duplicate it, and the layer on the bottom of those two layers, I'm going to go to my adjustments, my Gaussian blur, and blur it in just a bit to about 10%, and then you can see the combined effort really increases that sense of glow too. I'm going to go to my layer 5, which was the dark clouds above, and then we'll also remove the layer 6, but we'll start with the layer 5 and our eraser. And the eraser I've got set to the soft brush 2. So about 2% size and about 50% opacity on that eraser. And I'm just going to remove a little bit of that dark colour, and I need to remove it from the top layer to layer 6. And I really just want to make room for that sun to really dissolve anything that goes in front of it. Then we can go back to the colours that have those bright yellows and oranges, which is layer 8, and we've already started to bring in the effect of the sun anyway, so we can further enhance that by going back to the yellow, which is second in, turn the size down to 2% again, and about 30% opacity, and again we can really start selling the intensity of some of the highlights on the cloud as well now, maybe even down on the brush size to 2%. And I'm going to reduce the opacity down to about 10%, have the size slightly higher up on the 2%, and again, just bring in some subtleties a little bit lower down as well. Something like this. And we'll do the same with this orange colour we've already used. Maybe back up a little bit on the strength, so about 25%. And we can just bring in more of this orange as it cuts across again. Okay, we'll come back to the sky, but we're going to plough forward. So we'll go to the top layer and press the plus symbol to create a new layer. Back to our colours, and we're going to start with these colours. So we seem to have colours that have shifted actually, so we're going to start with that colour there at the end. And we're going to switch to our medium brush, put it at about the 5% size and 100% opacity. And we're just going to use this colour now to bring in, and then I'll continue with a rough shape and allow it to disappear. Now, I may as well continue it across, and then I can just drag fill that shape. I'll continue to create the next layers, and then I'll go in and refine that top edge. So I'll create another layer first, go back to my colours, go to this second colour, and this time I'm going to just create a slightly different shape, and it's going to cut in across, and then maybe we can have it rise back up as well, and then drag to fill that area. Go to our layers and create another layer, go to our colours, second in, and again we can create another feature that cuts in front, something like this. And again we can just drag into that area to flood fill that. So looking at this particular layer, I'm not really happy with the brightness of that, and sometimes that happens mid-tutorial or mid-painting and you just need to make some adjustments. So I'm going to go to the adjustments, go to the hue, saturation and brightness, and I'm just going to turn the saturation down to somewhere about 38, something like that, and then just reduce the brightness down somewhere more about the 47. I feel that that sits a little bit better for me, and because I've adjusted that, I'm going to change this one too. So I've reduced that down to 48, brightness, and I'm just going to reduce the saturation down to about 45. And I'm also going to do something similar with layer 13. So adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, just make it a smidge darker. Again, about the 48, but I don't need to do much more with that in terms of the colour. Okay, so I'm going to go in now and I'm going to change up the top edge of some of these, but I'm going to do it with a mixture of the smudge brush and the eraser. So if I go on the eraser, it's on soft brush. I'll change that to medium. I'll put it up to about 2% size and 100% opacity, and I can just start, if I go onto the correct layer, I can just start taking away in sections to start to create a mountain range in the distance that I'm more pleased with. Then I can go to my next layer and I can do something similar with that, and I can again use a difference with the smudge. So I'm going to medium brush on the smudge, put it to about 3% size and 100% opacity, and I can just nudge this around so it's a shape that perhaps I'm happiest with, or happier with anyway. And you can move it quite a long way actually from where you've initially placed it. If you keep nudging it, you can really shape it and sculpt it into the forms that you're happy with. And again, we can do that with the top layer, just to get the overall form just where we want it. Something more like this. And I'm going to obscure quite a bit of this with trees anyway, so we don't need to worry too much. Okay, I'm going to use that medium brush. I'm going to turn it down to the 2% size, keep it 100% opacity. And for this dark layer, I'm just going to push the texture upwards, so we've almost got the effect of a distant tree line. So we're just getting the silhouette effect, but we're going to use this, and you'll see it especially now in this lighter area. Perhaps we could even turn it up a little bit to the slightly bigger on the 2%, and we're just creating like a nibbled texture just to create a little bit more interest and noise so it doesn't look too flat. Then we're going to go to the layer 12, and we'll probably reduce it down even further to the lowest end of 2% or 1%, and we don't need to do as much of this, but just create a slightly imperfect edge. Smaller shapes because it is slightly further away. And if you need to, just go with the eraser again and just tidy up some of these shapes if it's looking a little bit too pushed around. And we don't need to really do a lot with the background layer anyway. Again, go back in with the eraser and you can do something similar with that. So I'm going to put that down to 2%, reduce it slightly to about 60% opacity, and again, you can just shape a little bit along that top edge with the eraser as well. Now once you're relatively happy with those layers, then we can actually soften them in a little bit. So we'll go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and just blur it in just a little bit to about 3%. And we'll do the same with layer 11, adjustments, Gaussian blur, and blur it in again to about 3%. Just pushes them back a little bit. And we're going to create another layer. We'll put it at the very top, go to our colors. We've got this black color, go to our brushes, go to our artistic brush and the leatherwood brush. Now it's on the standard settings, so you don't need to change anything. We are going to put it up to 100% size, opacity rather, and 2% size. And all we need to do initially is just draw where the spikes are going to reach up to. And you can think about tree trunks, and you might get a collection, you might get a nice tall one that sticks up. You might have a couple of large trees that stick up and then a bit more of a gap and so on. So think about the arrangement of those trees. However, they're going to work best for you. And then all you need to do is go from the top and then left and right, just start to build in these textures. And then obviously it gets wider as it comes further down. And then as it gets really at the bottom, you can just sort of scribble it in to fill it in. And we'll do the same for the next one. It's a really nice, easy way of doing tree silhouettes. And we'll just do this one. So left to right, a quite irregular shape. And some gaps is a good thing. So don't worry about leaving gaps. If it looks less uniform, that's a better thing. If you want to turn it down a little bit, you can, just to the lowest end of 2%. Be a tiny bit more precise again. Fill it in. Okay, once you've created that, we again just go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and just blur it in a little bit to about 3%. Just softens it, makes it a little bit more naturalistic. Okay, we're going to create another layer, but this time we're going to put it underneath layer 14, and we're going to change that little N symbol, and we're going to scroll down from lighten to screen, and you see it's changed to a little S. We're going to go to our colors at the bottom. We've got this orange. We're going to put the size of this brush up to about 30%, and really low on the opacity at 5%. And I'm just going to tap it into the sun area a few times, and you'll hopefully start to see a little bit of a glow. If I remove it, you'll see the effect that we've just added. I'm going to also increase it up further to about 60% size, and you can see now from the outline that it's really extending across all of that area. And you can really just move it a few times in like that as well. I'm going to change my brush size down to about 5% size and keep it at the 5% opacity. I'm going to use this orange just to, from the center, push up some sun rays really. And it's only hints of them. We don't really need to define them too much. Just the suggestion that they're shooting up like this, and a little bit goes a long way. And maybe just reduce it down a bit, the top end of 3%, and we'll just bring it down into this area too. And it gets a little wider as it comes further down. Perhaps we'll just switch to the yellow now. And again, if I reduce this down to about 4% size and 5% opacity, perhaps even lower actually, so let's put it about 3% size. And I can just bring in a little bit more yellow and narrow from closer to the sun. I really don't want to overdo this. And then maybe just a hint of it coming down here as well, just barely. If you overdo it, it's gonna just look a bit silly, too exaggerated, too cartoon-like. So I'm trying to bring in the effect really subtly. And then I'm going to go in with my eraser, set to my soft brush, and I'm going to put it at about 2% size and really low, again at about 5%. And I can just start to bring in just a bit in the gaps, or all the way across for that matter. I can just bring in some of these dark areas of cloud if I want to a little bit. Maybe a little bit bigger on the brush size in fact, so I can bring in some of these dark areas just to help bring out the contrast again between some of these clouds and the sun. And we can also take away from the edges of the mountain too. So as we come further over here, we'll bring out some of the darkness on the edge A little bit more if I feel like we're going too far in any places. Just a little bit off here as well. Make it a little bit more subtle. I think that works better. I'm going to put a layer on the very top and go back in with my white set to 2% size and 10% opacity, and I'm just going to further just extend some of that real white colour into just some of the texture as it immediately is around that sun, but not too far beyond that point at all. And I'm going to leave that particular tutorial here at this point. I hope you've enjoyed following along. If you do have a go, make sure to tag me on Instagram if you post it. And if you join my Facebook group, you can hopefully get feedback from myself and other people as well. Make sure to press the bell notification on the subscribe button if you haven't done already, and make sure to get notified of all the future tutorials that I'm going to release. Thanks for watching. See you soon.